Hi, everyone, and welcome again to Don't Blame the CRM podcast. This time I have a guest, actually again from city called Malmö in Sweden, Elisabeth from a company called Telavox. Welcome, Elisabeth.
Yeah, thank you. Happy to join.
Excellent. Thanks for joining. Maybe we could start briefly by you introducing yourself, and also if you could mention briefly what Telavox is all about and what are you doing?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Elisabeth. I work at Telavox, which is a telecommunications software company. As you mentioned, we're based in Malmö, but we actually have offices across 8 or 9 countries in Europe. So we're not solely based in Malmö. I've been working here for 3.5 years, which is also when we started working with revenue operations. So I've been part of the team since the very start.
Excellent. And I also saw on LinkedIn that you actually have the title revenue operations. I guess revenue operations and revenue intelligence is the name of the team or name of the function. Yeah. It's not that many companies in the Nordics that already have RevOps function, but how has it been for Telavox? You joined 3 years ago. Was that when you launched this type of team, or what's the sort of the background of RevOps at Telavox?
Yeah, well, actually, funnily enough, we started as commercial excellence. I don't actually remember when we started calling it revenue operations. I guess when we realized that no one else was calling it commercial excellence. I know in Denmark, they call it commercial operations. So there's a lot of different names for the same thing. So yeah, we used to be commercial excellence. And I think even my title didn't have revenue operations in it from the start. So definitely a little bit of late. But in terms of what we're actually doing, I wouldn't say that's changed. So it's literally just the name. And I would say, just speaking of what you said, I think that is the difference. You know, some people call it sales operations or commercial operations, whatever. It's still revenue operations. It's just a different name for the same thing.
And I also feel that the name can be different, but also the definition of what the team or department is doing. How would you describe what are all the responsibilities you have at RevOps at Telavox?
It would probably be easier to say what we don't do. It's a very broad bucket. But we are essentially 3 teams. So there's a team that I lead, which handles what I would probably say is slightly more traditional revenue operations. So we deal with all the tooling and analytics and also revenue intelligence. So learning about our customers and our prospects and so on. We have another team that works with projects, so leading internal projects and also enablement, our entire e-learning platform, both internally and externally. Mm-hmm. So that's keeping them pretty busy. And then we have a third team, which is actually just one person for now, that handles what we call the program management. And that's essentially incorporating our new colleagues after mergers and acquisitions. So in the last 3 or 4 years, Telavox has been growing a lot. So we have colleagues now in what used to be 3 other companies that are joining us. Yep. So that's taking a lot of our time as well, and it's part of our responsibilities.
So 3 teams. One is, you said, traditional ops, like tooling and analytics and I guess processes. Then also the enablement team, and then I think the third one is maybe the most unique one, which is M&A, mini M&A team. Sounds good. How big is Telavox? How many people, and also how many people at or in the RevOps function at the moment?
So as we are growing, it's hard to get the current headcount, but we're just over 400 people, and I would say maybe 200 of them are based here in Sweden. Mostly Malmö, where we're headquartered. So RevOps is growing a lot. Just in the next coming weeks, we have a lot of new colleagues coming in, but we're 14 at the current headcount. But we're constantly expanding because of the mergers and acquisitions. We've tended to get a lot more to do in a short period of time, and that's obviously when we need to be scalable and figure out a way to incorporate what we're doing, but for more people. So part of it is actually figuring out how to work in a more lean way, but part of it is also we just need to be more people.
And quite often RevOps teams, they focus on sales ops, marketing ops, CS ops, and sometimes even like finance ops. Do you also cover all those 4 different areas or just some of them?
Yeah, we do. Apart from, I would say, finance ops, we work super closely with finance and we support them with a lot of data coming from our sales and so on. But We don't handle that per se. But in terms of the kind of traditional ops areas, sales, marketing, customer success, we work with everything. But I would say historically, we have had a higher percentage of our time has been spent on sales ops in particular. And I think that's probably true for a lot of revenue operations departments. It's been sales ops evolving into revenue operations. And that's also where we've had to spend the most time. So we've sort of expanded our areas where we try to make the most impact. We started off with sales, and now we've started working more and more towards marketing and customer success. So I would say all three now.
Yeah. And you mentioned that you have done 3 acquisitions lately. So obviously lots of new people joining, and maybe they have had different processes in place, different technologies and tools in place. How would you say that is the time mainly spent on just getting all those new people up to speed with your existing processes, or do you also have time to develop new processes and new things while at the same time integrating lots of new colleagues?
Definitely both. I mean, it kind of goes in waves. So we haven't onboarded 3 teams at the same time, luckily, because we'd go insane. So obviously, when we are onboarding a new company or a new team to HubSpot, that takes a lot of time. But what's kind of cool about it, every time we've done it, we've managed to fine tune our onboarding processes to the better. So, we get to repeat onboarding people into our CRM, which a lot of companies you do it once, and all the things that you don't do so well, you don't have a chance to relearn, but we do. So every time we do it, it goes faster and faster. And then there's the kind of initial period when everything's just chaotic. You get a lot of questions and things, so we have to spend more time on that. And then we start seeing, all the processes are starting to settle, and that's when we have time to work on other things. So I would say we still definitely have time to work on continuous improvements. But there are periods, obviously, when we're a little bit busier with onboarding new teams or new companies into the system.
And are you still in the lucky situation that you just have one CRM? I know that sometimes when companies acquire other companies, and maybe the company has a different CRM, they continue sort of using it, and then you end up having many different CRMs, and of course, then integrating data between all these systems becomes quite difficult. Like, how is the situation for you? I remember you're using HubSpot as a CRM.
Yeah, we use HubSpot for everything, and so far, I mean, it's very much on a case-by-case basis. So far we've had companies coming in that didn't have a CRM, so they were more than happy to jump on our processes from day one. But we've also had companies coming in working with a different CRM system, and then it's been more, figuring out when it should we even be migrating, and when is the time to do it. So far we picked the migrating card. We're currently kind of in the final phases of migrating between systems. And obviously for us from RevOps, it makes sense to work in one system. It's one less system to manage, but it also makes sense that all the commercial teams are working alongside each other, because there is a lot of exchange that can be done between teams. You can compare, you can contrast. So I would say for the most part, it would be a massive drawback not to do the CRM migration, but never say never. It really, really depends, obviously, on the company and what's there currently. So far, it's worked really well.
Yeah, I feel that. Because having like a well-oiled sales and marketing and revenue engine is sort of a good competitive advantage for companies. So when they're about to acquire companies, somehow I feel that almost in the DD, in the due diligence process, it would make sense to also discuss these RevOps topics a little bit, like how is, for example, the migration CRM-wise and all these topics, because that obviously plays a big role in terms of how quickly you can actually get the value out of the acquisition.
Exactly, and I mean it's been a huge win for us well for the company coming in and joining Telavox. The fact that we have a revenue operations department that works solely with helping commercial has been a massive. They've not had that in their companies. They've been slightly smaller, and it's been a really positive experience to actually get the help with certain things. I mean, there's always going to be things that, don't work as you expect. And, every migration doesn't go perfectly. But I think just having a team to go to and ask questions, get help, proactively looking into how they can improve your day-to-day working life has been a really, really big win. So I would hope that's part of the early conversations as well.
Yeah. And how about your KPIs? You mentioned 3 different teams. And then, of course, you have sales and CS and marketing teams, and they have their KPIs, and you have company KPIs or objectives. Like, what are the main KPIs for RevOps, and are those KPIs the same as those functions like sales, CS, and marketing are having?
I would say we almost do layered KPIs. So the sort of top level KPIs are very much the same as our other commercial teams. We try to have the same KPIs for all the teams. So obviously the usual suspects around MRR bookings, net revenue retention, and so on. So those are non-negotiable for revenue operations. I mean, if the company and our commercial department isn't doing well, you can't say revenue operations is doing well either. I mean, the two of them are so linked. So that's definitely the most important KPIs for us as well. And they are the same. But then in order for us to actually be able to do our jobs, we can't just look at how the year went at the end of the year and decide from there that, okay, well, we need to make a change. We need to be proactive and lean forward and actually catch things before they become an issue. So a level down from the main KPIs, we will then try to have more leading KPIs. So that can be anything from deal creation to our customers' NPS scores or how many tickets we're receiving, to try and understand if things are going well or not so well and where we need to take any action to address it. Yep. And those KPIs are probably more exclusive to revenue operations, because I don't think a lot of commercial teams will be measured on, at the end of the day, their deal creation. It will usually be meeting their sales budget, for example.
Yeah. Who's deciding those leading indicators that you mentioned? Like, is it RevOps team, or is it, I don't know, company CFO, CEO, VP sales? Like, who's actually making a decision that these are
we're mostly setting them ourselves as a team, obviously not individually. I want to be measured on this and I want to be measured on that. So it's very much based on the expert in the various areas, because I mean, those KPIs are linked to the company KPIs. So there's no way you're going to be celebrating, revenue operations having succeeded in their deal creation goal when our company revenue isn't going well. So we always expect to see that our leading indicators are then going to have an impact on the lagging ones as well.
Yeah, and roughly how many leading indicators you have, and how often do you change them? Like, do you have them for the whole year, or do you discuss and decide them on a quarterly basis? How does that work?
We definitely try to keep them for the whole year. Otherwise, it gets really, really hard to measure progress. But we do set them on a yearly basis, depending on what we know are coming up. I mean, right now we have a big migration project for our support team, so we want to set KPIs surrounding that specifically, because it's taking up a lot of our time. So obviously, that's what we want to be monitoring. So we do change some of them from year to year, but in general, they tend to stay roughly what they were the previous year. But we do have a lot of KPIs. Sometimes I think maybe too many of them, but we cover so many areas. I think it's more of a symptom of what revenue operations actually does as a group, because we work on so many different projects. We work with so many areas of the business. You really can't boil it down to 3 KPIs and say that's it, because it doesn't even begin to cover what we actually do.
Yeah. And do you have some sort of commission or bonus based on those KPIs, or is it just like salary wise in sales? You often have, not always, but quite often you have a bonus when you hit quota, and maybe you have a commission on sales. How is it for RevOps? I mean, those KPIs are important to hit, but do they also play a role in people's salaries?
No, we don't work commission based or bonus based at all in RevOps. So we're basing it on actual salary. And that's to do a lot with the background people come from as well. I mean, as we've been talking about, there isn't much of a RevOps, at least going back a few years, there's not much of RevOps community in that sense. So a lot of people are coming from other areas. I'm from a marketing background. I have colleagues that come from a customer success background and so on. So they're used to working in other companies and with other kind of systems. So it's a little bit more, just baseline salary, basically.
Yeah. And I think that seems to be the case for most teams. I haven't heard of actually almost any RevOps teams that would have bonuses and commissions. If somebody knows a team, would be awesome to have an interview with that type of team and discuss how that works out. You mentioned that there's not tons of RevOps communities yet in the Nordics. Like, how do you keep up with all the new things, and how do you make sure that you can develop yourself as a RevOps professional? Like, do you join these US-based online communities, or do you have some colleagues and business friends that you spar with quite often? Like, how do you keep up with all the development in the world of RevOps?
Yeah, I mean, it is a little bit hard when you're in a completely different time zone. But I would say probably more of an issue is the fact that the business problems are a little bit different in especially Northern Europe versus the US. So we don't always have the same challenges. Some of them are definitely the same. So I would like to say I'm not looking at what's happening in the US and trying to learn, because they're also very much ahead of the curve. But I do try to find ways to connect with peers more locally. There's been RevOps meetings in Copenhagen. I was at one last week. There are quite a few people even here in Malmö. It's not a big place, but we met other professionals. We're talking about setting something up to meet with other RevOps professionals here. So there's definitely stuff happening in Europe, but it's still very much US focused.
Yeah, I know. And I guess the one meetup that you mentioned was the one organized by RevOps.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. It was super great just meeting people who work near me and around me. We all have different names for the same thing. Again, I found a different version of revenue operations, but at the end of the day, we do face the same challenges. So that's super cool.
I think because I actually had Tony as a guest in the podcast, Tony from RevOps, a few weeks ago, and he mentioned that they're nowadays doing these meetups. Maybe you could do the Malmö-based meetup when there's SaaSiest Nordic, the SaaS event taking place. I believe it's in April this year.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, no, we would absolutely love to. So if there's anyone listening that is wanting to join us, then let me know, because we definitely want to create more of a RevOps community. And especially when you work in completely different businesses, there's only pros in sharing learnings and figuring out better ways of working. So I think there's definitely a need for that locally as well.
I agree. You mentioned that you have been now doing RevOps, well, with different name though, but already quite a few years. And a couple of questions regarding that. First of all, the question that I get quite often is that what is the difference between RevOps and SalesOps? How would you answer that?
I would say RevOps takes on a much more holistic approach. There are so many synergies between what we can do for sales and what we can do for customer success. One example, and promise me you didn't ask me to bring this up, we work with Vino triggers for our sales teams, and we've set them up based on the sort of pains that we know that we can solve for our customers. That was already set up when our customer success team started working in HubSpot, and we literally just had to enable, it was a small setting in a workflow, and all of a sudden customer success were getting the same triggers on our existing customers. It doesn't make sense to me to have it split up in different teams, because it doesn't matter how much you have syncs and meetings and try to talk to each other. It's so much easier if you hire people based on their expertise and what they can actually do, and then have them work across different departments than separating it too much. There is a lot to learn. There's a lot of quick wins, and I think overall it just makes for a better kind of operations department when you can work as one team.
Yeah. No, that's also my recommendation, that if companies today only have sales ops, I would not set up CS ops and marketing ops and finance ops separately. So I would skip that phase of siloed ops and go into revenue ops right away. I think you save a little bit of time and also resources.
Yeah, and it helps if you have one CRM like we do. I understand that, sometimes you have to have different CRM systems for different departments for various reasons, but it does make it so much easier when everyone's in the same tech stack. Not just for us, less tools to manage, but we're seeing now, with our sales, marketing, customer success teams all working together, they get a whole different view of the customer. They get that full 360 from the first ad the customer saw to, the latest conversation someone had with someone in customer success. It's all there in the one system. It makes it so much easier. And there's a lot of mistakes that can be avoided just because you have a full view of what's happening.
So you mentioned HubSpot is the CRM, so sales is using it, and then I would imagine that it's also the tool for marketing team. But CS is also managing their portfolios and renewals in HubSpot. Is that right? Yeah,
they are. They've only been working in HubSpot for about 6 months.
Yep.
So we're still very much in the early phases of kind of getting used to new processes and everything. But so far, it's been going really, really well. They didn't really have any tools before. So I guess in that sense, it was an easy migration. It's a lot harder when you move from one CRM to another and have to get used to things not working like you expect them. Yeah. And right now, we're also working on moving our support team into HubSpot, which will be the kind of final piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, I think that's actually interesting because I know lots of companies have, of course, sales, marketing, and also actually service and support people using Sales Hub, Marketing Hub, and Service Hub. But then quite a few companies, then they still have a separate tool for CS. It could be PlanHat, it could be Gainsight, Tango. But it's interesting that you're also using HubSpot. How do you feel HubSpot works in terms of managing the recurring nature of the business, like and managing all the renewals and having good portfolio views? Have you been able to set it up in HubSpot in a powerful way?
I mean, I would like to say if there aren't things I wish worked better. I think one thing that we need to work a little bit closer on is the overall kind of customer health, which CS systems are usually good with that. HubSpot is much better for the commercial aspect to actually sales to the customer. But first of all, I've seen a lot of really positive progress with HubSpot. I mean, I know it's something they're quite aware of. I think at the end of the day, you have to decide if you want to have a best-in-class system for every department, or if you want to have what I was talking about, that holistic view, the 360 view of the customer. I think from the customer's perspective, it's probably better that you're in one CRM. They don't have, as many funny conversations where people in your company haven't talked to each other because it's all in the same system. So I think from a customer perspective, it might actually be more customer friendly because we avoid a lot of weird conversations where someone hasn't talked to someone in the company and so on. But yeah, I mean, HubSpot can't be best in class at everything. I think they definitely have an ambition to be, but it's still not quite there yet with some of the systems. So you kind of need to make that call. What's the most important? And there's definitely pros with having best in class. There's definitely drawbacks as well.
Yep, I agree. I saw on LinkedIn that RevOps roles are there's lots of RevOps roles these days. I guess that study was mainly based on US companies, but I would imagine that the situation being more or less the same in Europe and also in the Nordics. So lots of new people will enter RevOps teams, and you have done it yourself and also been part of a team that is growing very fast. What's your tip or piece of advice for all those people that are about to start their first RevOps role?
I mean, it's a bit of a cliche, but the whole term know your customer is so true for RevOps as well. Only your customer isn't the company buying from us, but all the internal departments that you work with. So one of the things that I know my team and myself get the most out of is actually, sitting and listening in on how sales are working, how marketing are working, how customer operations are working. Knowing the customer is equally important, but I would say in terms of the internal, just, try and get as much out of, listening in to people, speaking to them when you get a cup of coffee, ask if you can join listening in on a call, whatever you can do to learn what these departments are doing, what their struggles are, then you will not just be reactive, which is what I was talking about before. We get a lot of requests in. We could spend all day just reactively responding to things, but you can start becoming proactive. You can start identifying, what can you actually do to change the business, not just run it. So that would be my number one tip, to be super involved in all the departments and what they do.
And how often do you do that? How often do you join, for example, customer meetings, or do you join the meetings live, or do you just get the, recording? Maybe I don't know if you're using Gong or another.
I would say we don't do it often enough. It's definitely something that's on my agenda for this year, to be even more kind of deep diving into it. A lot of, I would say, what we've done historically is more speak to our teams and see, talk to them about how they experience all of this. But I would love to be more involved in the customer facing part as well, because there's so much to learn from speaking to actual customers or prospective customers, to hear about their pains and what we can help them with. So I would say we're not quite maybe there yet, but it's where I would like to be. And I think anyone setting up a RevOps department or moving into that role should definitely have that on their radar from the start, because there's so much to learn from it.
That's definitely a good tip. I feel actually two teams in SaaS companies that should join more meetings. I think RevOps is one, definitely making sure that they allocate time to join those meetings. And then, of course, also product teams. Product teams often, at least product managers, they often join quite a few meetings when they're designing something new and they want to collect feedback. And that's, of course, great. But I think just joining different type of meetings with big customers, with small customers, with happy customers, with customers that are struggling, I think you always get so many good insights, and I would imagine the same being true for RevOps.
Yeah,
well.
definitely, and as I was saying before, not just the actual customer, but the teams that you work with, because sometimes things have come to my attention. There's been a bug somewhere in the system that's been going on for 6 months, causing huge headaches for everyone. No one's even thought of telling me, and when I find out, I fix it in 5 seconds, and it breaks my heart to know that people have been frustrated over something that I haven't even been aware of. So being engaged and listening in, but also, being in a department that, welcome people to come with feature requests and things they want to change. I think that's a really important part of the role.
Yeah. So knowing your customers is important. What else for new RevOps people who are about to start this year?
Spending time on learning the systems, depending obviously what your RevOps role is. My team work a lot with tools. So, actually spending time on educating themselves. No one's going to educate you for you. So, you have to spend that time yourself. I mean, obviously I mentioned HubSpot a lot. That's a system we work with. I hang a lot in HubSpot's community forum because I learn a lot from what other people are saying there. Yep. Listening to podcasts and whatnot, that's all part of enabling ourselves to kind of raise the bar and learn what's happening out there. What can we do better? So I think that education time, and not see it as being unproductive, but actually realizing that's where you get your inspiration from, and learning more. That's super duper important.
Yeah. And then final question. Obviously, there's so many things going on, and you have already mentioned that there's so many things you're doing at the moment. But do you see any specific RevOps related trends that are happening this year and maybe next year? Like, you have been in RevOps already quite some time, and things are changing fast. Like, what are some of the latest trends you feel RevOps teams need to pay attention to?
I mean, if you're going to trust LinkedIn, I mean, RevOps is a trend in itself, which obviously for those of us that have worked in it for a while, it's like, how is this a trend now? But I would say being a little bit more cautious around your tech stack. So consolidating your tech stack instead of just adding on new tools. That's definitely something I'm seeing a lot of people doing an overview of what tools they actually have. Are they even being used? That's a really hard one, because if you ask a sales rep, do you want a license for this tool? They say, yes, please, I would. But is it actually bringing them any value? Having those discussions, it's not about saving money. It's more about saving time and being more effective with what you have. The money is obviously a plus, but that is, in my opinion, almost secondary. So that would be one, definitely kind of consolidating tooling. Yeah. And I guess the other trend, which is the one we've been talking about, is to not silo the ops department, to see it as one, and hire based on that. I mean, currently I'm hiring someone that, I could very much have put marketing operations on the title, because that is some of the key areas that person will be working with, but they're not exclusively going to be sitting with marketing related operations. So therefore I would never call it that. So that would probably be the other one, just seeing operations as one and not separated departments.
Yeah, those are definitely good and spot on trends. Well, I said a final question, but I have one more. It's going to be nice to test a little bit how well you know your own business and the sales. So could you briefly tell us what's the ICP, ideal customer profile, of Telavox? And also maybe you have an elevator pitch, like why is Telavox a good solution for those companies that are in the ICP?
All right. So, I mean, one of our key selling points is that, you have one solution that the whole company can sit with. So historically, when we were mostly a Nordic company, that was our icing, that we could have one telephony system that all the Nordic countries could share instead of every country having its own. So that's traditionally been something that, a lot of our customers have really loved when they've seen our solution going from 4 different contracts to one. So that's definitely spread out units. So it can be spread out across countries, but also spread out location wise. Being connected is obviously very crucial to a company that works with communications. So that would definitely be one. We're also really good at for companies that are growing and need to have a lot of flexibility. We're a good solution because they can change how their PDX works. As they tag on new departments and whatever. So companies that are in a growth phase has always been really, really interesting to us because they are also typically seeing some of the growing pains that we can help solve. So that's always been a big one for us.
Excellent. I think you did a very good job there. Elisabeth, big thanks for joining.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been really fun.
And thanks also for everyone listening. And we will be back, of course, next week with the new episode. Have a great week, everyone.
Thank you.